what are opiates?
So opiates are a broad class of analgesic pain relievers. So these groups of compounds like oxycodone, morphine, are class 2 scheduled, meaning that these drugs have analgesic pain reducing properties. Um, Versus the one that a lot of people in Massachusetts are taking is heroin, which is another type of opiate, but it is it's highly addictive, and other ones such as fentanyl, which is actually coming on the streets as well, which is even more addictive than morphine as well as heroin. And these opiates are plaguing Massachusetts right now.
Describe the addictive effects from opiates.
So these compounds, morphine and heroin, are very closely similar structurally. So as morphine gets into the brain, it crosses the blood-brain barrier, which is the protective barrier to get to the brain for other drugs, and only drugs that are penetrable can get in. And heroin gets in there a lot faster. And that is a key thing in the field of drug addiction, so that if you have a drug that crosses this a lot faster, then you get a lot more addictive and effects of these drugs. So you want so for the addict, they want a drug that is highly able to cross the blood-brain barrier, and as this because it causes the effects a lot faster, and you want that in a drug.
Overall, in the spectrum of drugs, opiates are probably one of the most addictive.
Um, they're one of, so in the laboratory set, um, it's very psychostimulants are very highly addictive, and that we're able to show clear self-administration, or these rats are able to work for the drug. Um, it's harder for heroin as well as other drugs of abuse, but there have been many labs across the country and the world that have used cocaine or methamphetamine as a drug, but heroin is a lot harder in the lab versus seeing it in in the human population, because there is a lot of psychosomatic aspects, as well as having a huge cycle in human drug addiction versus animal drug addiction, because as humans have a higher thought process. So that's one of the main reasons why you see um, heroin being a very common drug right now.
What are your thoughts on the increase in opiates being used as a drug throughout Massachusetts?
So, opiates like morphine, oxycodone, hydrocodone, and codeine are known to be a very effective pain reliever. It's been shown since the 70s, and showing that it is a very good pain reliever. But they are very addictive. And the new governor has put forth saying that we need to limit prescriptions of these, because these drugs are for people that are in chronic pain, the chronic like pain that does not go away. And if a lot of people are getting these because they have simple ailments, and these are not specifically these drugs are not able to be used for it, and they should not be used for it. And a lot of doctors are to blame in Massachusetts, and studies show that doctors are overprescribing these drugs. And the American Medical Association and the American Dental Association are trying to put forth more education and seminars for doctors to be able to understand prescribing practices, better prescribing practices.
So briefly, opiates are not as much a street drug that people are getting through other people. Rather, they're getting it more through doctors and pharmacists.
Yes, so real reason why this crisis started was the overprescribing of narcotics back in the 90s and in the early 2000s. So we saw a surge of these narcotics in the 90s and early 2000s because this is what doctors were using, and people got addicted to these drugs. And how do you find cheaper drugs? You go on the street and you get heroin, and heroin is actually very cheap. To my knowledge, I do not know what the value of heroin on the streets are, but I do know that it's significantly cheaper than getting pills from illegal markets.
What might be the future of opiate use in Massachusetts, and will this get worse?
So I feel like it's going to get worse before it gets better. As of the end of 2015, there were roughly about 1,300 deaths, overdose deaths in Massachusetts. That also doesn't include those that overdosed and survived. That number is, we don't have those numbers. Those are ER visits and people who are who are on the brink of death. They come back from drugs like naloxone, naltrexone, or methadone. They survive, but recurrence is very, very high. And drug relapse, which is how people get back onto the drugs, is very high. So about 1,300 people, 1,500 people, give or take, died from it versus people that just overdosed and survived. And those numbers are a lot higher, which is actually hurting Massachusetts and Boston's ERs.
Is there an effective way to help users of opiates get off, treat, or ease their addiction?
So it's a very interesting topic in the field of drug abuse pharmacology, is trying to find drugs that elicit pain relief, but do not elicit the addictive qualities. There are labs down at Scripps Research Institute in Florida, Mount Sinai Hospital, individuals there who are working on great research on these new on possible pain relief and trying to elicit pain relief without the addictive qualities. And a interesting lab who are really close colleagues of mine at Northeastern University here in Boston, where they're looking at other types of systems within the brain to look at pain relief, not via opiates, but the cannabinoid system, trying to use compounds that will actually elicit pain relief but not have addictive qualities.
Do you think drugs like Narcan are hurting the overall rise in opiates, or do you think it's something where it's saving lives and a good thing?
It's a double-edged sword. There are those that feel like, oh, I can overdose and I know I'll have Narcan, I can just ease that and get high again. But on the other hand, it is an extremely lifesaver drug in this field of reversing drug overdose. It has been used by fellow colleagues of mine in the medical services, emergency medical services, and they tell me that is an extremely great drug, that these people survive, but they do know that people are going to shoot up again. It's a very temporary, it's a Band-Aid. It really is just a Band-Aid, and people are going to shoot up again. And that's what we're seeing. And it's a sad atmosphere right now, but it's what's happening. So there has to be further things going on in Massachusetts government to really to really hammer down on the epidemic and not really touch upon Narcan Narcan, because Narcan really is a great compound to help overdose.
What scares you the most about Massachusetts and possibly all of America and the opiate use?
What scares me the most is kids between the ages of 18 to 30 are the number one group of people that are taking these drugs and are dying. Our generation between these age groups are dying by the numbers. Recent numbers from Massachusetts are 4 people a day are dying of from an opiate overdose, whether it be morphine, heroin, fentanyl. There's some type of opiate that they're overdosing from, and it's the age group between 18 to 30, 35, and they're dying, and something needs to be done.
What do you believe, leading right into the question, has to be done to stop the fight on opiates?
So there's a few things. I feel that it should be an education to doctors in the state of Massachusetts, especially in Boston, where we have 3 great hospitals and several great hospitals and medical institutions, medical schools. It has to be taught there. Addiction medicine in Massachusetts, or in addiction medicine classes in med schools, aren't brought up to the breadth of what addiction really is. So an interesting study from a local Boston hospital from this year was showing that those that were known to have a diagnosis of endocarditis, which is an infection of the heart, most likely this endocarditis is usually caused by IV drug use, and of the population, 1 out of 7 were also diagnosed with substance use disorder, which was most likely IV drug use, and that's what they indicated was IV drug use. But they showed that there was no individuals between the study time frame of 2004 until 2014 that any of these individuals got any treatment for opiate substance abuse, which is daunting and scary, because these individuals did not get any treatment, showing that the stigma of drug addiction is very much there, even in a doctoral clinical setting. And it's really saddening to see from a scientist's point of view, and as well as a clinical point of view, that this situation is going to get worse before it gets better. And doctors, as well as politicians, need to realize that drug addiction and drug addicts and drugs are there.